Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this session on IP support to SMEs. My name is Antonella Correra. I'm a Policy and Legal Officer in the European Commission in the SME unit. I think that it's an extremely interesting session that we're going to have today. We heard this morning the ministry, the Slovenian ministry, that was mentioning that there is a need of more innovation-oriented SMEs, and I think this is indeed a very, very relevant topic. And there is a lot of innovation in this assembly. I mean, we can start with these wonderful gadgets and badges that we have, the app that we are given. So there is a lot of tangible things that SMEs can do with innovation. But without further ado, I will leave the floor to the capable hands of my colleague Tamas Karali, who will be joining us from Brussels. He is the expert in the intellectual property unit in DG Grow. So without further ado, I leave the floor to Tamas. I will instead be your guide and will collect your questions from the room. So thank you very much and have a wonderful session.
Good morning. Good morning to everybody. Hello, everybody. Good morning. I would like to welcome you on behalf of the European Commission at our dedicated session. At our dedicated session to IP support for SMEs at the SME Assembly. I would like to welcome those who are following us online and also those who are at present at the assembly in Portorož, Slovenia. I would like to encourage our participants to take notes and prepare questions for the last part of the discussions when we will have the opportunity to raise different questions to our speakers today. As we all know, the pandemic had a major impact on SMEs across the industrial ecosystems. In 2020, the number of SMEs decreased by 1.3%, employment by 1.7%, which meant 1.4 million lost jobs. And also the value added in SMEs decreased by 7.6%. Strong public support has limited the number of SME bankruptcies, but SMEs are unlikely to reach the pre-crisis levels even by the end of 2021, unfortunately. SMEs are central to the EU's joint recovery efforts and long-term sustainable competitiveness, as we all know. They are the engine of the EU economy. They bring innovative solutions to challenges like climate change, resource efficiency, and social cohesion, and they help also spread them throughout Europe's regions. Hence, they are central to achieving the EU's twin transition to a sustainable and digital economy. SMEs are rarely using the industrial property system. While more than 30% of SMEs declare themselves as innovative, only an estimate of 9% of the SMEs register IP. SMEs are missing opportunities to boost their competitiveness, as those small businesses that register at least one IP right are 21% more likely to experience a growth period and are 10% more likely to become high growth firms than the firms without IP. Only a strong IP policy can make EU SMEs competitive in the EU and on the global market and help SMEs to recover from the pandemic and make the transition to green and digital technologies seamless. SMEs face various challenges and they have specific needs in the area of intellectual property. SMEs do not have the necessary basic knowledge about IP. They believe that there are too many initiatives, trainings are too legalistic, and there is a lack of strategic advice. SMEs have also negative perception of intellectual property, unfortunately, and they believe that the IP system is overly complex and too expensive, and they don't see the link between their IP and the business strategy. SMEs do not have IP strategy and capacity to manage IP on a daily basis and are not even aware of the IP potential of their intangible assets. There is also an untapped financial potential of intellectual property. We need to make SMEs more attractive to investors. This is absolutely crucial. It is difficult to use IP in the financial reporting, and investors like banks, venture capitals are not used to IP as assets. And it's very difficult to use IP as collateral to get a loan, for instance. SMEs need help to valorize their intangible. Last but not least, enforcing IP is also expensive, and alternative dispute resolution systems are still a bit underused. The European Commission has a number of initiatives in the area of IP management and the SME policy. First of all, competitiveness comes first, which means that IP is a tool for the business strategy and not a standalone goal in itself. Second, to improve IP management, it is key to use all relevant IP protection methods, not only registered IP rights, but also unregistered IP rights, trade secrets, and other contractual confidentiality arrangements. Not protecting intellectual property or intellectual assets is also an option, but it has to be a conscious one. The European Commission in November 2020 adopted the IP Action Plan, in which we identified 4 key areas for action where the Commission needs to focus its efforts in its SME policy. The first one is providing financial support for SMEs. The Commission and the European Union Intellectual Property Office launched the SME Fund in the beginning of 2021, which has offered financial support through these IP vouchers for SMEs impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. More than 11,000 SMEs benefited from the SME Fund, which offered in total more than 20,000 services. The new SME Fund for 2022-24, with its increased budget of 30,000 million euros, will partially reimburse national, EU and international trademark and design registration costs, national patent registration costs, as well as the costs of the IP scan services provided by the national intellectual property offices. The second key area for action for the Commission was to provide strategic assistance to services for SMEs in Horizon Europe and beyond. In this context, I would like to mention only the Horizon IP Scan, which provides free IP support services specifically designed to help European SMEs involved in EU-funded collaborative research projects to efficiently manage and valorize IP in collaborative R&I efforts. We will hear about this service more today from our speakers. The third key area of action is to help European SMEs navigate or orienteer in the jungle of the many SME instruments and IP tools and services available in the EU member states at European level and also internationally. In this effort, I would like to single out the upcoming EU IP Information Center, which will be operational by the end of 2022. In addition, the international help desk in China, Latin America, Southeast Asia, India, and the new one in Africa will offer their services and to the European SMEs, such as free of charge helpline, trainings, awareness raising events, and other services. And last but not least, we also have the EU SME Helpdesk, which helps the beneficiaries of EU-funded programs to deal with IP matters. We will hear about these also later on today. The fourth key area of action for the European Commission is to help SMEs access to finance. In this context, I would like to single out the Leadership for SMEs program, which aims to develop a holistic program allowing innovative SMEs and startups to efficiently leverage their intangible IP assets to stimulate their growth by opening access to suitable funding opportunities correlated with their business strategy and market potential. For the financial sector, the valuation of the IP right is crucial, as the leader or investor is mainly interested in fungible collaterals and less attracted by the monopoly itself. Therefore, the Commission is working on improving the IP valorization process in order to make access to finance easier for SMEs. The EU is also very interested in exploring ways to promote the use of IP as collateral in debt financing. After this very short introduction, let's start the substantive part of our session. Today we will have two excellent speakers whom I would like to warmly welcome now. They both have very broad experience on IP management and SMEs. I will introduce them before the presentation. The first speaker today will be Kristina Vainikka. Kristina is currently working as a policy expert for IP at the Confederation of Swedish Enterprise. She has a background both as a researcher as an entrepreneur. Throughout her career, she has focused on issues related to knowledge-based assets, such as trademarks and patents. And how these assets are linked to innovation and entrepreneurship is important to understand in order to understand the logics of the knowledge economy. She has written several books, so I am very curious to hear her presentation. And Kristina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And I will start out by some words about the Confederation of Swedish Enterprise. And the Confederation of Swedish Enterprise is a member organization for all types of companies in Sweden. We have to date 60,000 member companies, and of those member companies, 98% are SMEs. So the reality of the SMEs is the reality where I'm working. And as you might know, Sweden is often placed in the top when innovation is ranked between different countries. So, for example, in the European Innovation Scoreboard, we are one of the innovation leaders. On the other hand, if we look at the registered right that Thomas was mentioning, only 8.52 of the Swedish SMEs have a registered right. So that means that Sweden is actually below average when it comes to having registered rights. The importance of intellectual property rights, that has been shown over and over again. So we all have read those reports, hopefully, to see the importance of the intellectual property right. And any expert that you talk to will confirm that importance. And also, as Thomas mentioned, there are several very good initiatives made on how to help SMEs with the IP issues. And I must ask a question to the support because I'm not able to change the slides. So if you please could help me with that. Good. So, because what I'm going to talk about today is that we have created an environment where we understand the importance of intellectual property rights for SMEs. But the problem is today that we are actually creating a lot of water. And if you would see my slide, you would see horses in water, because the problem today is that we can lead the horse to water, but we can't make the horse drink. So what we often fail in doing is that we have these different tools, there's different helps that the SMEs could use, but they are not, see if I can get the right slide. So excuse me. So here are the horses. The problem with IP and the SMEs today is what we fail at doing is making the SMEs ask the right questions at the right time. So we have those fantastic resources that Tomas mentioned, but there is still a problem. And since I mentioned that Swedish companies, Swedish SMEs are actually below average, I'm going to give you some examples on why I think we still have a problem. And a very Swedish example, which I think is a dilemma when we talk about intellectual property rights. I'm sure you're well aware of Alfred Nobel, the inventor of dynamite and the creator of the Nobel Prize. Often when we talk about intellectual property rights, we use people like Alfred Nobel as an example. And he is an excellent example both as an inventor and as a person using the patent system, because through the patent system, he was able to build his fortune. And thanks to the fortune, we do have the Nobel Prize. However, when we are doing that, when we're using him and his work as an example on why should an SME be concerned about intellectual property rights, we are not addressing the world where the SMEs are today. So we sort of know intellectually that Alfred Nobel didn't watch Netflix, he didn't take Uber to work. When he traveled, he didn't stay at Airbnb. But yet, when we talk about intellectual property rights, we often talk about his reality. And why is that a problem? There are several different problems here that we need to address. One of the first things, and actually you can go back to the examples that Antonella described on the innovations that she could see in the room where she was, is that innovation today often has at least a digital component. It is also the truth that we have often complex innovation with service components and products, so physical products and services linked together. So innovation is very different from the time when innovation was one thing that you could hold in your hand. So it's more complex. Another problem is when we think about the innovation process. Often when we talk to SMEs about intellectual property rights, we talk about the innovation process that we sort of imagine that Alfred Nobel had. So we talk about the inventors. So one guy coming with one brilliant idea, doing his experiments, and then applying for a patent and then going out into the market. The innovation process that many SMEs are in today is more circular. People are coming into the project and they are leaving the project. If you meet SMEs that are innovative, they often start to talk about the team. And then creating the team is perhaps their most important step. And they may also enter the market rather early. And we can see that if you look at, for example, Facebook. Facebook today is not what Facebook was when it was launched on the market. And the consequence of that when we talk about sort of intellectual property rights and innovation, and we have this linear view on the innovation process, then we can start discussing the strategic issues sort of late in the process. The problem is if we have this more circular innovation process and with teams, you can't wait to discuss the intellectual property rights, you will have to start discussing that early on. For example, if you're creating a team, you should at least think about the copyright agreements, especially if you're creating digital innovations. Perhaps you should have an NDA with people coming in and leaving your team. So you will have to consider the IP strategic questions very early in the process, not to ask the questions late. So one thing is actually that we need to broaden what we talk about when we talk about intellectual property. And Thomas mentioned this in his introduction. Just to give another Swedish example, where we have Spotify as a Swedish service for music. And here we have the examples of when we talk about intellectual property rights, protection, creating the monopoly, that's one aspect of intellectual property rights. It's important from the sort of Nobel perspective on intellectual property rights. But we can look at intellectual property rights from other perspectives. For example, if we look at Spotify, their entire business model is handling intellectual property rights. You have consumers that want to listen to music. You have creators that have created music. They are sort of the spider in the web, connecting those two parties, or what you want to call them. So using the intellectual property rights could be the core of your business model. And if that is the case, then of course you will have to discuss intellectual property rights really early. Another thing that Thomas mentioned, which is really important, is the relationship to investors and the venture capital. And it's true, Thomas definitely pointed out some really crucial problems that you can't really go with intellectual property rights and say to the bank, hi, I have this intellectual property rights, give me a loan. That won't happen. And when we describe that to an SME, that could sort of confirm their view of, I don't really have to care about intellectual property rights, it doesn't really serve any purpose for me. But on the other hand, we also know that if we have investors that are interested in buying a company, for example, or investing in a company, they are going to do a due diligence. And when they are doing that, they are going to look at the intellectual property rights. So without having made those conscious decisions on what to protect and what not to protect, you're not attractive to investors. We have to describe that to the SMEs. And that also means that if you are creating a startup and you're going for the scale up and potentially you want to make an exit, the ones that are going to purchase the company, they're probably going to pay more if your IP portfolio is handled in a good way. Look, for example, at MGM that was bought by Amazon recently for more than $4 billion. Amazon paid for the media content. The media content, that's copyright and trademarks. So without having that portfolio so that it can be identified and you can know who owns what and can do what, they wouldn't have made that investment. It wouldn't have been possible to make that type of exit. So the problem that we have today, so there are so many very good initiatives. The problems have been identified in a very clear way, both by the European Commission and others. The problem is, it seems sometimes that we are building sort of wells and fountains, so we are creating the water. But the problem is what we need to do even more is sort of leading the SMEs to the water and make the water taste so good they can't really help but actually drink it and enjoy it. And that is important for the competitiveness of Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very Thank you very much, Christina, for your insightful and very well structured presentation. I think you excellently got the most important message and emphasized it very well, that we have to lead SMEs to the water actually. And this is probably the biggest challenge for also for the European Commission and also for the member states, to reach these SMEs who would be probably ready to embark on a journey with us on an SME instrument, but they are not aware of the many SME instruments that we put forward for them. And we are going to still come back to your presentation later on, but now I would like to turn to our next excellent speaker, Jörg Scherer, who is the managing director and founder of EURISE. This is the European Research and Project Office. Jörg Scherer has been working as a research and development manager and business advisor in both the academic and industrial sector for over 20 years. Having founded EURISE in 2000, he acts as a senior innovation management expert for different units of the European Commission, executive agencies, as well as business and research associations at national and European level. He has an outstanding track record of coordinating and participating in more than 60 European research and innovation projects, ranging from FP4 to Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe. He has been working as innovation expert, evaluator, advisor, trainer, and coach for the European Commission services and the Enterprise Europe Network and different research organizations, business incubators, and technology transfer centers in Europe. So Jörg, we are very curious to hear your presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tama. Thank you very much for your kind introduction, and yeah, good morning to everybody. Hopefully you see the full screen in your let's say view, so that we do not have any technical issues so far. So let me just start to fully subscribe to what has been said before. I mean, really, I like very much also the introduction of Tamas, which is linking, let's say, also IP management to SME business growth, which is a major part of the European IP Action Plan, and also, let's say, the strategic talk of Christina, which explicitly mentions that IP is a very crucial part of your day-to-day business operations. And that just let me just highlight a few more aspects to what expect IP is closely related to IP to business development. And so that's really a few, let's say, just highlights. I mean, first of all, I mean, IP provides exclusivity. It helps SMEs to be the first on the market, and it excludes competitors. IP enhances reputation and increases the company value. It definitely boosts the potential of the company for further commercialization and business growth, and it gets many SMEs also in high-level business collaborations and ensures freedom to operate. And last but not least, been mentioned before, IP is very important to get access to further funding and investment, which we all know is a big hurdle for startups and smaller businesses. So just to further go down in a way that IP is definitely affecting your business in many ways. So regardless what SMEs are producing or making or what kind of services SMEs are providing, it is very likely that SMEs are using or creating IP in their daily business. Almost every SME has a trade name or even more product names. Even some have invented or improved services, products, and all of them also most probably are using IP of others, sometimes without recognizing. So definitely IP management, IP awareness, and to know how to valorize IP from creative works is a major issue for business growth. So most SMEs will have valuable business information, from customer lists to sales tactics, that they may wish to protect. So we do not only talk about registered IP, so soft IP, trade secrets is a major intellectual asset in most of the SMS businesses we know. So many would have produced, assisted in the publication, disseminated or retailed copyrighted work. Others have introduced new services. So in all that cases, SMEs should consider how to best use the IP systems to benefit from it. Remember that IP may assist SMEs in almost every day of the business development, from the product development to product design, from service delivery to marketing, and last but not least, from raising financial resources or to export or expand businesses outside Europe through licensing, franchising, or other kind of business transactions. So definitely IP is a major business asset. It represents an important financial and legal asset for all the companies, including the startups. It is often estimated that IP counts for more than 80% of the overall company's value. And of course, for investors, companies with a solid IP portfolio are attractive investment targets. And there are simple 5, let's say, main reasons why that is. First of all, IP has no limit on its value. So unlike most other asset classes, like, for example, buildings, whatever, the value of IP can increase without limits. For example, the value of trademarks are largely determined how the company does perform. So registered trademarks, for example, do not only protect the existing value of the brand, but also will contribute to its further growth. IP can be leveraged in many different ways. So licensing, for example, is not just for bigger companies. It can be a very profitable business model for SMEs and startups as well, since there are very little costs involved. So, for example, patent licensing does not only require a famous brand behind it, but it only needs a good and well-protected technology. And the IP portfolio can also be used as a collateral for obtaining different types of financing. Third, the IP portfolio reduces also operational risks. So IP works on a first-to-file basis, which means by protecting, for example, the brand name and your technology, you can ensure that nobody else can get better rights, for example, to your name or technology in specific countries. And companies that protect IP seems to be more trustworthy partners for business collaborations. So not protecting IP property might also put partners, for example, resellers or distributors or other partners in the business value chain in a difficult position. For example, a reseller might not be a very motivated partner if infringing products are being sold for knockoff prices and there is nothing to do. So actually, you see that IP rights might also boost your marketing and your sales. So for example, strong brands enhance business performance primarily through their influence on the 3 key main stakeholders, which are, for example, customers, but also your own employees and potential investors. So you see, there is a wide range of business assets which are linked to SMEs. And we know, as it has been mentioned before by Tamas and Christina, that there is a need to help SMEs and startups to manage their IP properly and to raise awareness on IP services which are available. And this is another main, let's say, objective of this workshop today, is not only to stress the importance of IP management, but also to help you to get access to existing IP initiatives. Some of them have already been mentioned by Tamas at the very beginning. So I'm just starting to say, for example, there is the European IP Helpdesk, which is there for nearly, more than 50 years now. And it offers IP support for SMEs, but also for researchers involved in European funded projects. And there are, let's say, many key actions which are managed by the European IP Helpdesk. For example, there is a helpline. And if you have a question regarding IP, then you can address to the helpline and you get a jargon-free answer, a first-hand answer on your issue. But even more, there is a very well-developed training scheme. I think last year, the European IP Helpdesk welcomed more than 12,000 SMEs and researchers in the different training models. And of course, there are bulletins, there are publications of many kinds, guides, which might help you to get a better insight and knowledge of IP management. But it's not only the European IP Helpdesk, there is let's say, a wider landscape of IP support initiatives. And Tamas also stressed the fact that there are current initiatives in place also to, let's say, develop a better supporting scheme also in closer collaboration between the EU IPO and the European Commission through the SME Fund. And next year, I think the scheme will also offer even more opportunities than already this year through voucher, iBono services, consultancy services. And I think this is also very well, let's say, supported through the national IP offices all over Europe. So you see here, there are many actors in the field which may help you in your specific, let's say, situation. So, for example, the Horizon IP Scan offers IP consultancy or IP pre-diagnosis for SMEs involved in collaborative projects. And we see that from our experience that quite a larger number of success stories started through collaborative innovation, through open innovation processes. For example, through the financing of the European projects in Horizon 2020 or now in Horizon Europe. And of course, getting on board of such a collaboration means that you need to see how to manage existing IP brought into the collaboration and how to valorize the IP generated in the collaboration by your company itself or jointly with other partners in the collaboration or external partners which are somehow linked to the innovation process. So there are just a few examples of the existing services, and of course there are sources of information available which you can address to if you want to have more details on the existing service. And it's been mentioned that, of course, as we have a strong focus on the European market, nevertheless, it might be part of your innovation strategy and your business strategy to expand to international markets and to see how to get a place in those markets through, for example, licensing or franchising or open a joint venture. And then, of course, you need also some support to know about the IP system in those countries. And in order to avoid any stupid mistakes, you will get advice through the colleagues from the international IP SME helpdesk, which you can also address through helpline and training sources. So there you see here, there is a wider scheme of support measures available and really helps you to get IP support for your specific issue. And you see there, that's just a wrap up and very short, let's say, go through the existing landscape of IP support initiatives. And as mentioned before, you may expect there will even be more service available, for example, also concentrated and focused through the European IP Center, which will be a major one-stop, let's say, initiative of the Commission and the EU IPO to guide SMEs through, let's say, the jungle, or let's say, or give you more orientation on existing service so that you can leverage on your IP the best for your business development. So that was just my contribution, and I will be very glad to answer to any question or to see you then in one of the services for your SMEs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jörg. It was a very well-structured presentation, and it gave us a very, very good overview of the different services provided by the different actors at European level. And I hope that SMEs who are following your presentation, took note of the different initiatives, because these are those initiatives that they should look at and benefit from, and find out which are the most matching to their business needs. Now we reached the Q&A part of this discussion. So I would like to encourage both those who are following the discussion online to share with us their questions in the chat. And also those who are following the discussions in Portorož, Slovenia, could now raise their hands. My colleague Antonella is going to collect questions. We are going to first start with questions in Portorož, and then we are going to collect questions also from online. So I'm going to now wait for Antonella to read out these questions, and then our speakers will reply.
I will just repeat your question for the others. So just the question, I will repeat it.
Okay. Hello, my name is Lisa Lang. Thank you so much for the interesting introduction. I'm a holder of several technical patents, so I share the pain. And yes, sometimes I question why did I even start it in the first place. I came a little bit later to the session, so my apologies if you've raised that in the beginning. And of course, this question will come. NFTs. I know there's a lot of love and hate out there, and of course I would be interested in both of your opinion around it, also from a political perspective and from a real life perspective, because at the moment it feels like very overhyped, but it doesn't mean it couldn't be helpful, ... The stage is back to you.
Sorry, your question was exactly...
I don't know, Christina, would you like to comment on it? Maybe just from my side. So NFTs definitely it's a big issue, and we got more question also through our helpline. What are, let's say, related IP protection, IP management strategies in that particular field of action? So what I can say from my side, I mean, I'm not supposed to have, let's say, political opinion on that, but what I can say from the European IP Helpdesk, for example, can say that we are recently opened, let's say, discussion with the experts in the field. So we just had a call yesterday with a group of experts in that field in order to offer, let's say, better consultancy in that field, and through a dedicated also workshop session or training material on that field. So it's really we have a couple of experts which are focusing on IP related to digitization. We already have, and we will extend on that also in our, let's say, training program for 22, that we will have more training and interactive session for IP and digitization, IP and artificial intelligence, and NFTs are definitely a big issue on that. So that's also something I can mention from our side, from the training, and how we will address that, the need for more information on that with the related experts.
If I may add, to some extent I can agree that it is overhyped. Like always, you need to know why you're doing something. It's the same thing with NFT. Don't just go there because you can, think about why. And I think one important thing with the NFTs could be that they solve problems that are not really able to be solved yet. For example, when it comes to digital creations like digital art or digital photography, it might be difficult to say, here is the original. But if you use NFT, you can point at that is the original, so it can help to create trust, and that could be important.
Hello, my name is Rasmus Cherning. I'm with the Creative Business Network, and I have a question for the fantastic Christina Weinecke. Since you're representing the Confederation of Swedish Industry, I think we often think that the IP protection is to protect against the Chinese or the Turks or the Bangladeshi the Bengalis to copy our works. But in reality, we often see large corporations in Europe copying the works of the SMEs. We really see that large retailers go in and find nice designs nice ideas, inventions by our SMEs, and simply copy them. And the cost for an SME, I represent the culture and creative sector, to actually go against these corporates is enormous. We right now in Denmark have a case that goes to the High Court of Denmark, the Supreme Court of Denmark, in IP, where a ceramist has been driven to the ground from having a turnover of 80 million Danish kroner. Is down to, I think, 5 now, because they had to spend all the time of fighting this huge retailer on an issue where they have lost again and again.
So Thomas,
so this is just a question: what can we do about the large European corporations infringing on SMEs' IP?
Thank you. I'll take that, and I agree. This is a very big problem. We all have examples of larger corporations making infringements from smaller companies that have created perhaps design or other works. We have in Sweden, for example, a case that has been through the court system at several occasions regarding the design of a lamp created by a small company. And I think one problem here is actually the trust or the knowledge of the intellectual property system. So even large corporations do not always understand and respect the rights held by others. And we need to address that as well. We are creating programs within our organization. For example, we have seen copies that have been bought by hotels, design copies bought by hotels. So we have to address the hotel owners don't buy copies. So there is so much to do in that field, and one way and one reason why that is important, because if we don't address this problem, we can't create trust in the system, and we need to have trust in the system.
Thomas, I'll just, before giving the floor to the next question, I will repeat the first 2 questions that were asked for the online chat. So we had a question on NFT. What was the opinion of the speakers? So if the online audience wants to ask as well the speakers about NFT. And then we had a question on infringement of IP rights from large businesses enterprise. So these were the questions that were asked so far. So Thomas, see whether you get something from the online chat. Otherwise, I will move to the next question.
Thank you, Antonella. We haven't got questions online, so you can continue collecting questions in Slovenia.
Okay, thank you. Please.
Good morning. My name is Caroline Michler. I work for the French Ministry of Economy, and my question is, I was wondering what your thoughts were regarding the arrival of the Unified Patent Court, and how much this will change what SMEs require as far as support goes.
Do you want to take that, Jörg, to begin with?
Oh, you can start and I will take on later.
Okay. Now, I think it's going to be very interesting to follow the development when it comes to the unified patent. As being a rather small country, perhaps more inventions are going to be patented in Sweden, for example, and what would the effect be of that? But we also perhaps can see positive effects that more SMEs are able to protect their inventions in more countries. And even if they're themselves not interested in those markets, they could then sell licenses to companies on those markets. So I think the most important thing is actually to really closely follow the development and see what are sort of the effects of the new system.
Yeah, maybe just Jed from my side. Also, what we see, of course, first of all, there is a strong interest in the European, let's say, SME community. So, what are the benefits? Yeah, how will that also have an effect on my IP strategy when it gets in particular to use IP for internationalization activities, to go into more foreign markets, to cover, let's say, a broader territory of European, let's say, market domains. And of course, also it's all about costs. It's definitely a big issue that to say that, with what we know also from recent studies from the European Patent Office, but also from EU IPO, that still, the costs which are linked to the overall IP system are still a major, let's say, blocking element to get startups or SMEs really efficiently using the existing IP sources. And but what we need really to do is to raise even more awareness on the effects and the potential benefits of those developments for the different IP communities. And this is again something which we will address. We have a close collaboration also with, in particular, with the EPO, to see that they are developing also then specific awareness models, which then will be shared with the national IP officers, and then of course with then with kind of, let's say, what we call then a kind of a roadshow, in order to see that really that all the positive effects, but maybe also challenges and risks will be clearly addressed in collaboration with ministries and SME organizations all over Europe.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Johan Barros. I am from Accountancy Europe. I have a quick remark and a couple of quick questions as well. So the remark is that we believe that accountants and other SME ecosystem actors are actually well placed to help SMEs access IP rights. So first of all, to make them aware of the potential of the IP rights, and then to help them to access, go through the registration and to identify opportunities. So I would encourage the European Commission, for example, to work together with these SME ecosystem actors like accountants to basically help build a robust IP access ecosystem for SMEs. We are already doing this at Accountancy Europe with EU IPO, but we would like to see this with the European Commission as well. Then my questions concern the valuation of IP and valuation of intangibles for SMEs. So first of all, from the European Commission, I would just like to know, do you already have a planned timeline for action? Are you planning any public consultations on this topic of IP valuation, any proposals, and if you have an indication of when we could expect this? And then a broader question, perhaps for Christina as well. Obviously, there are some risks as well in IP valuation and having IP as collateral for loans and things like this. So do you believe that the potential benefits outweigh these risks? Thank you.
And then perhaps I can start. And first with a comment, I absolutely believe that other actors in the SME ecosystem are actually crucial to reach the SMEs because their focus is often starting the business, making the money, and they're perhaps not thinking of the IP issues early on. So if the ones that they meet in their ecosystem approach these issues, that could be crucial to actually get them started working on the IP issues. When it comes to the valuation of IP, I think Jörg mentioned this, that it's important to link the IP strategy to the business strategy and use the rights that are actually creating value or have a purpose with the different rights. And just to give a note on valuation of IP, I wrote an article some years ago in a Swedish research paper on valuation of IP and how different we value IP in different types of situations. So if you're going to inherit a copyright, you value it in one way. If you are if there is some damage caused, then you value it in one way, and then you have the mergers and acquisitions, and then you value the IP totally different. And I think that is also a problem that we actually have to address, that the same thing has so many different values depending on the situation. We're quite used to handle that when it comes to chairs and tables and lamps, but it's more difficult for us to handle that when it comes to IP.
We just had two questions from the audience here on site. We had a question on unified patents. And then we had a question and a remark from the accountant community and the role of accountants to support IP SMEs to access IP ecosystems. Then a question on IP valuation and risks and benefits as IP as collateral for loans. So this is for the online chat. If there is a reaction from the online audience, otherwise we will move to the next two questions.
There is no reaction or comment in the online environment, but I would like to then reply to the question and also make some comments shortly, because I see that we are already running out of time. So first of all, yes, the work has been already started on IP valuation, both in the European Commission, but especially in the European Union Intellectual Property Office, with which we work very closely together. There is an expert group which already started to work on this topic, and then they are looking into developing standards to better harmonize basically the way to evaluate IP, and hopefully this could help promote access to finance in a longer run. Hopefully we will have the first tangible results in the next year in 2022. And when it comes to cooperation with the accountant community, I can also say that that we are now in the phase of basically exploring new possibilities to understand how could we involve new circles into our work and to improve our SME policy. And access to finance is one of the crucial new areas where we are still a bit lagging behind. That's true, but this is the new area that we want to focus on. And I believe working closer to accountants is very much in the pipeline. And just on the Unified Patent Court, one sentence. This new system will be very beneficial for SMEs because, of course, it will bring a very serious cost reduction, and cost reduction is extremely important for SMEs. And also in the Unified Patent System, there are SME-related special provisions to make the access to this system even easier for SMEs. Thank you very much.
Okay. Hello. My name is Albana Leknori. I represent Tirana Chamber of Commerce, but I'm a senior IP expert. I have 20 years in the field. I am contacted because Christina, I know, in an online conference 2 months ago, organized by WIPO. What is my question? Access on the bank, it's impossible, especially for the SMEs. I have a lot of clients who have trademarks to protect, who have inventions to protect, and in Albania, no one can help us. My question is how they can profit, looking that Albania is part of EPO Convention, it's part of WIPO, it's part of Madrid system. How can they profit from the funds outside? Because I closed with inside. Thank you very much, and congratulations from 3 of you.
And I'm not sure who should answer that, but I do think for the competitiveness of our entire region of the world, we have to address those issues. When other parts of the world are moving forward, we have to move forward in this field as well.
I can just say from the services and the funds and access to funds which I was presenting, of course, there's a high level of openness also, just really to test all the SMEs which are somehow directing themselves to the system of the IP support system. And of course, also, I mean, it's not a policy making scheme. Nevertheless, all, let's say, ideas really to extend, let's say, the competitiveness of the system and really to have a better access are pretty welcome, and I think they will also be directed to the European Commission in a way that it will then become also part of the Euro IP action plan to see how that scheme can be improved. So from my point of view, see there is a high willingness also from the European Commission to listen and to react on let's say whatever comes up, let's say from the practitioners in the field. And I think that's exactly the idea of the whole scheme, involving the business actors, the IP actors, ministries, governmental actors, whatever, that they really get together. And now I think activities are much more focused than it used to be before. I see also the whole scheme of the European IP Information Center is about really to see how a network or networks actually can be built on, to see that not only, let's say, on upper policy level, but also that all the network actors, and we have seen that a high diversity of different actors also today asking questions, being present in the SME assembly, that they, let's say that we can better channel, let's say, their views and needs and wants towards, let's say, the European Commission, and then from the Commission again going back to the member states and the assorted countries, which are all involved in the different schemes, because we see that really it's not just focusing, let's say, on core member states, but really has a high openness also to anybody who would like to link to the scheme. So that's what I see also from my day-to-day practice, that really things are growing and evolving, and I think there is much to be developed and to achieve. Then also now, as we see, a major milestone will then definitely be that the IP, the European IP Information Center, will be ready to start maybe end of next year, and there will be a number of other activities following that, let's say, scheme of harmonization and openness and better access.
Hello, my name is David Caro, European Small Business Alliance. Some of the questions I was going to ask you've already answered, and I'm glad to see that. But I'd like to point out the EU IPO are doing some excellent work in the field of alternate dispute resolution. And it's good to see that that's coming, especially for SMEs, where not only do you have the cost of registering your IP, but then if there is a dispute, in many cases, the large corporations will turn around and say you'll be bankrupt long before you have a chance to challenge us. What I would like to see, and again, I'm glad you've mentioned it, is much more emphasis on patent. At the moment, we're very focused on IP, and quite rightly, but I think we mustn't miss out on the patent and the work of the European Patent Office and how important that is. We have to look after the physical as well as the digital future of Europe, and I think it's very important that we emphasize those two. And I think there should be a mechanism for the both offices to work much more closely together than they do. And again, you've touched on it, but I think it's vital for what we do here in Europe and to protect ourselves that we need to bring the costs down dramatically so that many of the small businesses who are the prime developers of IP, and in many cases the physical developments, can register and protect those products so that Europe isn't at a disadvantage to the US and to China, where many of the other developments are coming along, and where many of our ideas and our products are stolen and put into work because they're not protected here in Europe. So I think it's vital that we look at that cost aspect to encourage small businesses to protect their products and not be barred because of the cost of doing that. Thank you.
And maybe I can start, because I think there is one important point here about Alfred Nobel that I want to make, because sometimes when I talk about the importance of looking at innovations that could be more complex and so on, that is interpreted as if sort of the traditional patent strategy is out of date. And I would say that is still crucial. So just because we do see these digital innovations, the service innovations, does not mean that the sort of the technical solutions are of less importance. Just to give one example, agriculture does not involve as many people in Europe as it used to. We went to industrialism and now sort of a knowledge society, but agriculture is still important. I still want food, I still need food. And this is the same thing with patents. Just because we're talking about trademarks and digital innovation that cannot be patented, patents are still important. They are sort of the agriculture of the IP system. We still need the patents. They are still very important. So that you get that message clear. And just to emphasize also that dispute resolution in other ways than just taking things to court, those are really important as well. Thank you.
Yeah, just to add, because I think that the question was really good and addressed a couple of, let's say, main issues related also to the let's say expected defragmentation of the overall IP support scheme. And of course, it mainly includes the bigger IP authorities, the EU IPO, but of course also the EPO and the national IP offices. And I'm happy to see that also that of course ADR is continue to be a major issue in order to develop schemes and initiatives to reduce costs for dispute resolution. And happy to see, we had just to talk also this morning that ADR will be of course also on the agenda for next year to see how let's say funds can help and initiatives can help really to reduce costs related to ADR. But even more, I mean, of course, we know that of course there are still many, let's say, technologies and business areas linked to patents. And then just to mention another initiative, which is really that at the very moment, the EPO and national IP offices in collaboration with EROI are working together to provide an overview on existing initiatives in order, which, for example, also on national level, because there are many, let's say, also subsidies and financial support initiatives managed on national level, which are reducing costs for patent protection. And last but not least, also mention a very new initiative of the European Patent Office, which is a series of best practices for technology transfer based on patent protection, which means I think it's about in 10 different technology areas. It sees how small businesses started out of patent protection and what is the, let's say, the overall life cycle, really starting from raising whatever, from the idea generation, patent protection, getting investors on board, raising financial support for further business development. And I think this is something which then will start next year with a couple of, let's say, also new publications, best practices and training opportunities, particularly for smaller businesses, for startups, and more than welcome to share, let's say, the lessons learned from those success stories with your or the overall SME community.
Thomas?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Thomas, I have one last question from a member of the audience that had to leave. It concerns IP gender issues in IP and how to accelerate the integration of IP into female entrepreneurship.
And I'm gladly replying to that question because I've done some research on this issue. So hopefully that there is a book coming out with a chapter by me and a research colleague where we looked into the patent system and female innovators. And the fact is that, for example, in Sweden, the number that I have on top of mind is that only 14% of the national patent applications in 2019 had at least one female inventor. And we are often describing ourselves as an equal country that's providing equal opportunities, but with only 14% of female inventors in the national patent applications, there is a problem. I would definitely say so. And also that the number of students leaving, or the female students leaving STEM educations is a lot higher than 14%, even if you go back 20 years. So there is something more happening in the patent system or the innovation system. And we also made interviews with several women, and they described that within the innovation system, they were unseen, unheard, and unappreciated.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think this was the last question here from the audience, Tamas. So I leave to you to wrap up. And I'd like to thank you also here from Slovenia, the excellent and very inspirational speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, first of all, to our excellent speakers for their great presentations, and also for our guests who raised questions and followed the discussions. What we learned today is that that SMEs have to be more conscious. Basically, SMEs have to be more conscious about their intangibles, and they have to deal with the question of how to protect and enforce them very early at the process in the business development, but also during the product design, or when they are trying to raise financial resources, or when they are delivering the service. SMEs really need to think about IP, because this is how they can become more trustworthy partners. So it really affects their business performance. It's also important that IP creates value, but we need to make sure that SMEs are aware of all the possibilities and all the SME instruments that we have. We know that the speakers are very conscious about the new unitary patent system, which will be important also for SMEs. The alternative dispute resolution, which will be more and more used in the future. And we also know that we have to focus more and more also on helping SMEs to enforce their IP rights when there are IP infringements. And of course, we have to lead SMEs to the water. They have to know about all our efforts, and they need to know and need to ask the right questions at the right time. So in one word, basically, be more conscious about your intangibles and be conscious of IP. And with these words, I would like to conclude our discussions today. I thank you very much again for everybody for the participation, and I wish you a very nice day. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.